Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Wow. I'm looking at these stats that Cheryl just gave me, and it's kind of mind-blowing, and it's all about addiction in our country and who's dealing with it, how we're dealing with it. Dare I say that there may be somebody in your world that has an addiction. Maybe it's yourself and you're dealing with it. And for that, you could use some help from a certified mental health coach and a certified Christian life coach. And she's here. Cheryl Hines joins us again. Welcome, Cheryl. How you doing?
I'm great, Steve. Good to see you.
These numbers, surprising. 15 million alcoholics right now in the United States. There are about 10 million Americans addicted to a drug other than alcohol. 40% of all family problems brought into domestic court are alcohol related. I mean, some of these are not so surprising. 75% of all juvenile delinquents in the United States have at least one alcoholic parent, but it's still staggering when you think what people are dealing with.
Right. It's and then Steve, so many of us think, okay, well, I'm not one of them. I'm not addicted to alcohol. I'm not addicted to the drugs. But the staggering part for me is that there are 2.5 million pathological gamblers and 3 million who are compulsive gamblers. And then there is 40 to 80 million Americans that suffer from compulsive overeating. And 5 to 15% of those will actually die from consequences related to overeating in any given year.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling, and it's staggering when you think about the numbers of lives that addiction affects every one of us. Further, I mean, on into the pornography and how that affects the family. For me, it's so heartbreaking. And it goes back to, where's hope? People feel like, where's hope? And is there hope? And is there a chance that I'm not going to recover from this? And it's about the choices that we each make in our lives.
Do you find that when you work with people, Cheryl, that they get to the point where I give up. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I don't think there's, any, like you said, hope. I don't think it's there. I'm just going to continue with my addiction, whatever it may be.
I think sometimes, yes. They've tried over and over and over again to get help, to do sobriety, and most of the time they do it on their own. What I found is that so much of it is related to the hurts of their lives. So much of it is related to they need to escape the pressures of life, or they need to be and it insulates them. They think it insulates them from worry and anxiety, or it needs, this helps them with approval and acceptance, or it gives them a sense of control and power. But in the long run, none of the addiction fills any of those empty places. None of the addiction fills any of those empty voids. And then they get desperate, and then they think, well, what's the point? I'm just going to keep on. Or I'm so far in my addiction, I can never recover. Or it's too late for me. I'm too old. I can't get out of this addiction. Sometimes the neural pathways in the brain affect people, and they don't think that they can get out of it, But the beautiful thing is how the brain works is that if they start changing some of the stuff, some of the neural pathways, some of their thinking, and they get off the alcohol, the drugs, the whatever it is, the brain starts rerouting those neural pathways again to a different mindset and a different thought. My husband and I personally had a friend, my husband's best friend, We had tried to do an intervention a number of years ago, and he, when he found out he was going to go out of town, out of state, he said no. And about 4 months later, he died. He died a lonely, painful death by himself.
So let me make sure we understand that. He was going out of state.
To a rehab place that I
Okay.
had found for him. I had found a place for him to go
Gotcha.
to that one of the ministry leaders from the local Celebrate Recovery, he works a lot with addicts, and there was a good place for him to go to learn how to do life different, to detox, and to process through some of his own inner hurts and some of those thoughts and feelings and ideas that were all lies. And when he found out that it was going to be an out-of-state rehab facility, he refused to go.
Wow.
And he died. He died. And 3 weeks after his death is when they found him. So that's the reality and the truth that we face every day is why are we in this place? And it's because, for him, he was hurting so bad from abuse from childhood and neglect and abandonment, and I don't know his whole story. My husband would know more of it, but he gave up.
Mm.
He gave up.
Now, you
And
said before, Cheryl, that people who are addicted oftentimes realize that they're not feeling what they want to feel with the substance that they're on, no matter what it is. Why would they continue doing it?
they're looking for that next feel good. They're looking, see, as an alcoholic, they can numb the pain for a certain length of time, but they build resistance, for a lack of a better word, to the alcohol. And so they drink more and more and more and more to try to numb the pain, because then there's guilt and then there's shame because they know that they don't want to be doing this, and there's guilt because they are doing this, and there's shame because they might have gotten in trouble with the law because they're breaking the laws, they're breaking the rules, they're drinking and driving, whatever the story is, they continue to try to numb the pain, and so their body builds tolerance to it, and they continue to drink more and more and more. Where if I was to drink the amount of alcohol that one of the ladies that I'm working with currently was drinking, I'd be dead. I'd be dead. But over the years, her body has built tolerance to it. And she's now currently in rehab again.
I recently heard that, what you just said, that people who drink a lot of alcohol, their body starts metabolizing it in the same way it processes food. It becomes a food in some regards because of just, the volume of alcohol over the period of time. It's amazing how the body will adapt. It's actually trying to do you a favor. Oh, this is what you're giving me, so I'm going to work with this. So to your point, your body's not acclimated, mine is not, to that volume of alcohol, and it would take us out.
It would. It would literally. I would die. I would die. There's a reason why my parents always said no alcohol in the home. No alcohol, nothing. I mean, we didn't even have cooking alcohol. And since I've been working in recovery and walking a journey, I've asked them, and why such a strong stand on it? And they were like, they decided that they were never going to even taste it because they were afraid that they might like it so much and that they wouldn't have control over the consumption of it. And so their stand was, we will never try it. We will never consume it. We won't even have it in our home. And we're going to really, really, really instill in our children that fact. And I think if we would learn in our society that the drugs, the alcohol, the overeating, whatever it is not going to fill the void in our lives. As a Christian, I believe back in the 60s when the Bible was taken and prayer was taken out of school is really where so many people didn't understand that there is still hope. We have hope. For me, hope is found in God. That's my hope. But when people aren't even taught where their hope can find, where they can find hope, then they're looking in all these places, and they turn to drugs, alcohol, pornography. They turn to overeating, whatever it is, to try to fill the void of their lives. God created us with feelings, emotions, ideas. And it's in those feelings, emotions, and ideas that if we don't understand what they are, we're going to turn to the alcohol, to the drugs, to whatever, gambling, whatever it is.
What do you think is the number one reason, Cheryl, that people gravitate to addiction? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Would those be, major drivers for that?
I think so. Yes. That and they have had so many situations in their lives where they've been hurt, and it's those hurts that they don't know how to handle. PTSD, military veterans that have PTSD, that turn to a substance to try to control the PTSD, to try to control the pain of it, and they end up losing their lives. So it's I believe it's the root cause is a lot of it is the abandonment, is the hurts, is the fear, the anxiety, that all stems back to possibly childhood, or possibly something that happened in our adult lives. And we end up trying to medicate, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Yeah, it's staggering.
In your role, what do you think is the answer? For example, somebody's dealing with anxiety and depression. Maybe they're starting to pivot toward alcohol or whatever substance, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Before it gets to that, and even if it's on its way to that, what is the answer? Is it traditional therapy? Is it other medications to deal with the anxiety and depression? Again, that's just going to be a band-aid for the symptoms. You're not getting to the core. But what do you think is the answer?
Mm-hmm. I think all of that. Sometimes anxiety or depression is a chemical imbalance in the brain. I mean, that really is a fact. If you can get that treated, and you can get the meds that you need to balance that out, then you don't necessarily need to go the other route. You have taken care
Can
of
we
it.
go there for a second? How is it determined that it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, that there's, let's say a personality disorder? I've always wondered, is it just talking to a doctor, psychiatrist to kind of evaluate that? I mean, isn't it more chemical?
It is. And I think there are tests, there are tests that they can do, blood draws and that kind of stuff that they can do to see where the neural pathways are, and to see what, I don't understand all of that. I'm not a doctor. But I think that there are tests that they can do to see where their chemical balances are, and then they can treat that accordingly. However, I do believe that there are times when they put people on an antidepressant or on anxiety meds when deeper down there are issues that the person hasn't really talked about, or hasn't processed, or hasn't walked through. We want to think, Steve, that we can go around it or go over it. But until we walk through it, we're not going to really get to the place where we need to get for healing. And, that's with anybody, any of us. I would rather go around something than I would go through it. But we have to sometimes go through the pain in order to have the healing that's on the other end. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're talking about, let's say
Mm-hmm.
somebody had a trauma, let's say in their childhood, whatever it might be, they have to
Mm-hmm.
work their way through it to to get over it as a
Yes.
but many times before you even get to that point, they turn to addictions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a young lady that and I brought her up before, where I've known her for 5.5, almost 6 years. And I started working with her. I was her sponsor in Celebrate Recovery. That's what you call people that work with somebody. But I was more than just a sponsor. I was already learning how to ask those deep questions. And she told me she had panic attacks over Christmas. She hated Christmas. She didn't want anything to do with Christmas. And I asked her, I said, why? What is it about Christmas that you don't like? And she said, she has memories of a Christmas tree. Okay. What about a Christmas tree triggers you? What about that Christmas tree that you see in the store causes you to have flashbacks and tremors and just have nightmares? So she started telling me stories about when she was 3 and 4 of situations that happened around a Christmas tree. So as we started unpacking this, and as she started telling me these stories, I was like, okay, now let's invite God into this space. Because I'm a Christian coach, let's invite God into this space. Let's invite God into this space, and let's allow God to bring healing to this little girl who had this situation happen to her. And literally walking with her through this difficult place, and just really having inner healing in that spot where that little girl was. Where today she has Christmas tree in her house, and she's not afraid of a Christmas tree. She doesn't have those nightmares and those flashbacks. Why? Because somebody showed interest. Somebody asked her questions about the flashbacks and the nightmares about a Christmas tree. And she was honest about that Christmas tree. She was an addict. She was an addict for many, 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 many years, and now she's had 6 years of sobriety. But it's because she did the hard stuff, and she walked through it
instead of
not
around it.
around it.
Yeah. And many times when you walk around it, you reach for something.
Yes.
And there it begins. Wow.
Yeah.
In her situation, her total challenges wasn't connected to Christmas or the tree, but are you saying that that was part of it?
That was a drop in the bucket
Okay.
of everything that, but that is where it started.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
That it was around Christmas time that I started working with her, and she would tell me she didn't like Christmas. She hated Christmas. She hated everything to do with Christmas. And I started asking her questions about why that was. And so that was the drop in the bucket of many, 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 many pieces that had to be pulled apart, like that onion, that layer. Onions have layers, multiple layers. And it was with that onion, like that onion, that we pulled it apart. She was in therapy. She was in therapy at one of the local places where I live. And she was in therapy, and she'd been in therapy for a long time. But the difference from me to a secular therapist is, or a therapist that works for the government, is they can't talk about that intimate relationship with God. They can't invite God into that space, whereas I could, because I'm not affiliated with anybody except for the Celebrate Recovery group. So it's different. The therapist helped her a lot. Yes, the therapist really helped her unpack a lot of stuff. I'm not knocking her therapist, But this was just a different approach
Sure.
for some of the same things that her and her therapist were talking about.
Now, Cheryl, when you work with somebody, let's say they're 15 or they're 50 and there is an addiction issue, is the process different, age related or no?
I would say so. The 15-year-old hopefully doesn't have the total addiction like a 50-year-old does. The 15-year-old hopefully doesn't have the trauma that the 50-year-old does. Yes, that 15-year-old probably went through some trauma, but it's not compiled on top of each other like it would with a 50-year-old.
Gotcha.
By the time she gets to 50, they get to 50, life has piled on top of life. And it's like pile on top of pile on top of pile. And so you have to dig through the mess to get to the root. The 15-year-old hopefully doesn't have as much stuff stuffed on top. So the addiction is still the same, but it's different.
Totally get it now. Yeah. It's like, let's say you went through something in your childhood. You could have been 5. Whether you're 15 or 50, it was still impactful. But if you're 15, you didn't have to deal with it again and again as much as the person who's 50. Like,
Correct.
Example, something happened when you were 5 years old, you pick bad relationships, now you have another bad relationship, hypothetical here, then you have another one, and you just keep repeating it, but it's another layer of that trauma showing up. And you don't even know why it's showing up because it was something
Correct.
from way back. You haven't connected it yet.
Right. Whereas a 15-year-old can have the same trauma at 5, but that 15-year-old hasn't made the same mistakes over and over and over again. With Celebrate Recovery or any 12-step program, the first step is denial, walking out of denial. We do the same thing over and over again, expecting to have a different result.
Yeah.
And most times we don't get a different result until we start realizing that we are living and walking in denial of an addiction or of a life hurt or bad experiences. Once we realize that we need to walk out of the denial and we accept the fact that, yes, I have a problem. I have a problem. I 14 and a half years ago, I finally realized I had a problem. I had an anger issue. I didn't know this until, I knew I had an anger issue, but I didn't know that the neural pathways and the endorphins in the brain are affected with anger just as much as it is with chemical addiction. I didn't know that until I started realizing that I had an anger issue. And why did I have that anger issue? Because of unmet expectations, because of piling on top of piling, the relationships and the verbal emotional mess that I was living in. When I finally realized that it was me, the other people around me were perpetrating, were not doing the right stuff, but I was living as a victim. And I had to realize that I needed to get out of that. And I had to start doing different. I had to choose different. I look back at one of the step study books, one of the books with Celebrate Recovery that I did a class on 14 years ago. And one of the questions is, how do you see God using you? And my answer back 14 years ago was, I'm so messed up and broken, God can never use me. He how would he ever use me? He can't use me. And here I am.
Yeah.
14 and a half years later. And because of the choices I have made, Steve, because of the hard work that I have done, because I've allowed truth to come in and not lies, where I'm at now. And so the hope is, if people look at their lives, whatever it is, And if they really want to start living a different way, walking out of the denial of their lives and saying, I understand, I can't do this anymore and I need help. But then really, really being willing to walk through the journey, whatever it is. These two women that I know are in rehab right now, they run. And I've told them that. You girls run. You run. You don't want to deal with these broken places. You don't want to deal with the hard stuff. So you run. And what do you run to? You run to the addiction.
And it's
And
so
they
easy
don't,
when isn't it? Like you think of it, it starts off small. Somebody just goes home and says, I'm gonna have another drink. I'll just out tonight's going to two, maybe three. That's all right. And then it just keeps progressing like the snowball down the hill. Um, I want to ask you, Cheryl, you say you had anger issues. Could that have easily been addiction issues? It just
sure,
manifested in a certain way, but you
sure,
could have turned into, it could have been addiction.
sure. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Hands down. My personality isn't the kind where I like to lose control of me. Um, I I I don't like to not feel a certain way. And so if I would have gotten drunk, which I've never been drunk, I've never done drugs, I've never smoked. But if I would have, I wouldn't have liked the way it would have made me feel because I would have lost control of me. And so and that's my personality
Yep.
is, plus that mom and dad speaking in my ear and saying, this is not okay. Don't mess with this. Don't even go there. So it's that voice of mom and dad, but then also knowing that I don't want to lose control. But I didn't understand that the anger was just as much of an addiction as what a chemical addiction is. You know, and I want to say that I didn't throw stuff, I didn't punch holes, but man, I sometimes I had words that weren't very nice,
Mm,
and that's just as ugly as what throwing something or punching a hole is.
sure. Yeah.
So
Words are like weapons. They can be,
they are, they
Yeah.
are, yeah,
Yeah. But it's funny, we talk about our path and the universe had a path for you. And it's, you know, it's like a decade and a half later, look what you're doing where you were and helping
right.
people, go through similar struggles. If that is somebody, they're listening, they know somebody that is dealing with addiction, has challenges like that. How does the journey begin with you?
How does it begin with me?
Yeah.
Um, I first sit down and hear some of their story. I want to know where they are at. I want to know their story. Maybe not all of it, because there's a lot to unpack. And then from there, starting to look at truth. Again, as a Christian life coach, I have a packet that I put together. There's a lot of scripture that talk about who God says we are. God says we're chosen. God says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. God says we're created in his image. God says we're loved. The God of the universe talks about who we are. And so for me, I have a packet that I put together in the very first meeting that I have with anybody that I meet with, I give them this packet. So part of their homework assignment is there's a 28-day where they have to look up scripture and write down what the scripture says. And so that's where it starts, because what I want to do is I want to start helping them understand that there's truth versus a lie. And then from there we just unpack. We
Yeah.
we start unpacking layer upon layer of what is truth and what is ugly. Um, and somebody will tell me something and I say, well, what is truth in that? Is that truth or is that a lie? Well, let's say somebody tells me they're ugly. And I say, okay, what's truth? What's a lie? What does God say? Does God say he makes junk? No. So what's truth? Are
It's
you ugly? Or are or what is truth? Well, God says I'm beautiful. Okay. So that's truth. The lie is that you say you're not beautiful. So now change how you talk, change what you say, change. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's a day by day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, walking a different journey and learning to live and understand what is truth versus a lie. So, yeah.
They're telling us we're out of time, and I want to keep going. And I think it's so effective, even on a subconscious level, when you question yourself, when you say to yourself, and I've heard this effectively done before, is it true that you're not beautiful? Is it true that people don't like you? Because when you say that to yourself, you question, your subconscious is saying, oh, wait a minute. Well, hold on a second there. Maybe that isn't true. Why am I believing that it is? What's your website, Cheryl?
insightlifecoaching.coachsolutions.cc.
Yeah, it's a new year. Just the numbers are staggering what people are dealing with in terms of addiction, but there are people like you that get it, understand it, and have found their calling and want to help people. So yeah, start the process, or if you know somebody, start there.
Right.
Yeah. It's challenging for all of us, because I truly believe we do know somebody that is dealing with something.
Yes.
When you look at those numbers, like cancer.
Right.
Is there anybody, can you say to somebody, do you know anybody that has cancer? No, I don't know anyone. I don't even think that's possible anymore.
Right.
And
yeah.
With
and it's
addiction,
the same way with addictions.
exactly.
Yeah.
Cheryl, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Good stuff.
See ya.
We'll be right back.
All right.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.